So, welcome everybody. Today, I'm super pleased to have Andreas with us today. He is a data scientist, a data analyst, he's a global AI consultant, and he's really building the community. He travels around the world. We had a great conversation before this around all the places he's visited. So, really broad perspective on things. It's an absolute pleasure to invite you today, Andreas. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me. And we had an amazing discussion beforehand, so I'm not quite sure how much we're going to cover here, but I'm sure we can go through all of it again because we're like on fire before that, so it's going to be fine.
That's awesome. So maybe let's start with a little bit about you. Tell me a bit about who Andreas is. What do you like doing? What are you passionate about? Before we get into kind of all the work stuff.
So I'll give you a bit of background. There are a few interesting facts, which hopefully is going to spice up a bit the discussion. So background, I'll start from the professional because sounds a bit, we have to stick to that. So studied maths quite a few years ago, although I'm still 21, as you can very well guess. I'm sticking with that, so just to put that in the beginning of the interview. I studied maths, and then I started going around trying to find what to do in life. Did everything from starting initially as a customer service, just thought, why not? And eventually start being an analyst for retailers. That's one of my favorite tagline for my presentations. I usually show the brands that I worked through the few years of my life, which was retailers as a data analyst. Then I decided to be product manager for publishers. Then I started setting up my own data science team to deliver for publishers. Then I thought I had enough of education. I'm moving into insurance, which I don't think that a lot of people did that jump till the time that I was in a conference and found three more. So I was like, oh, I'm not alone here. And then from insurance, I went to travel around the world because I thought I had enough for a bit. And then COVID happened and came back to work for local governments for education, healthcare, and currently working for construction, civil infrastructure engineering on the data science, which is a bit of a brief summary. And the reason I say that is because when I present, I always say, at some point in your life, I influence your decisions. How scared does this sound? So that's my tagline on presentations, which wakes up people because they realize that I'm the visualization of someone of most of the people who have at least shopped in a supermarket, did a degree, and I was somewhere behind just checking what you were doing and how you're doing it and how you can do it better. So that's a bit of my background. On the not so professional side, I like traveling, as we discussed earlier. A few things that people cannot easily guess. I did used to do MMA, not professionally, so let's not put there, but it was a
Ah,
nice way to relax the brain. And my favorite thing when things are going really not well on any project delivery is it's more likely for me to become a ballerina than us finishing this part of the project. Further down the line, you'll see where the ballerina is coming from, but it did actually happen of having for a piece of a small time performing into a ballet event. You wouldn't imagine that if you see me in real life. I leave that there. I'm sure we're going to come back to that further down the discussion.
okay, fair enough. Mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that I suppose was keeping you busy. Do you have a favorite?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu generally, to be honest, because it's so much more about using your brain and building your strategy while you're trying to fight rather than actually how strong you are. It's all about the brain for me. I work with data, so it's all about keeping your brain busy.
Okay, interesting. So, how did you get to data analyst and AI
By
strategist? How did that happen?
by accident, mostly. I was a teacher. I started teaching in UK originally I'm Greek for so this and that's where I started. So when I came to UK, I decided to do my aerospace engineering. I don't know why I went from maths to aerospace engineering, and then when I finished there, because I couldn't get my work clearance because I was working when you work on this kind of industry, you need to have clearance, security clearance. I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to teaching. I'm going to teach maths, and then I felt like I enjoy teaching, but not in a big city like London. It's not pleasurable. and I got my first gig on the retail management, loyalty management, which was about writing code, do analytics mainly. And I generally, surprisingly for someone who is working with statistics most of the time, I really detest statistics. I don't like statistics at all. I just find it, from all the subjects of math, statistics for me was the least favorite because it's so not true. And that's why I moved from the statistics is to more of the, back then, 2012, I think it was a big data era, which was, rather than try to predict the future by using random statistics equation that doesn't make any sense, on actually use all your historic data and the enormous amount of data to try to build more accurate predictions. So I was more of the analysis side rather than on the predictive side. And that's how eventually I found myself. Just for the record, I never officially had a data scientist job title, believe it or not.
Okay.
I was leading data science teams. I even had a data engineer title once upon a time, never data scientist, which was, to be honest, I was too senior at that point to be called data scientist because the trend came a bit later in my career. So yes.
But it could be a bit disappointing. Yeah.
As I usually say, especially when you build teams,
Mm.
my best data scientists, I would always expect to be better data scientists than me, because by that time when I was leading my teams, I needed to have data engineers, I need to have data analysts, I need to have data scientists. And yes, my interest was in the data science because it's the predictive side of things. And I love the data storytelling. So if I could summarize myself most as a job title, if I could have it, would be data storyteller or data artist. I take numbers, as I said to one of my interviews, surprisingly, and I got a job, believe it or not. I said, "Oh, Andreas, what's your strong point?" I say, "I do not like humans. I take numbers and I build stories. So give me your numbers and I'll tell you what to do in your business, but I cannot interact with humans." Having said that, my role is a consultant, so I'll leave that to your imagination after that.
You're going to have to speak to humans, right?
Yes.
It's always the thing, like never say never, because it will probably end up that's where you go. Were there any key turning points? You've spoken about quite a lot of things that you did, but if you consider where you are today, what really turned the wheel for you?
Two key things, to be honest. The first one is, on my first job as a data analyst, what I find very frustrating, and I found that this was a gap in the market and still is a big gap in the market, is you have your product managers, your project managers, all these people here, great social skills, great people pleasers, or being able to speak to people that they cannot understand what's happening on the other spectrum, which is your technical stuff. So I was always getting some random requests with random deadlines, which when I was seeing from the technical perspective, I was like, what on earth have you been thinking committing to that? And I think that this will resonate with a few of your more technical peoples. You go, you commit to the client, and you come to me and you try, and I have to save you mainly. So that was one of the points that I said, I don't want to be a data analyst anymore. I want to move into product management. That was one of the key changes in my career that I was
I can
like,
imagine. Yeah.
yes. And I remember when they told me when I got this job back then was, by the way, how come you selected me? Because let's face it, I knew that was between two people. And I remember the feedback was the other person had very strong personal skills. I'm like, I'm not going to get offended. Um, but we like the fact that we're a small team on a big corporate environment. And if we get overwhelmed with requests, you can speak with the client, but you can also get your hands dirty and you can help us with the workload. So that was one of them. And the second key part of my career, which just keep on progressing in my career, was I wanted to work with the most data publicly available in business. So that's why I was always changing careers. For me, it was not when I changed from publishing to insurance. The excitement for me was I had a big imposter syndrome. I'll be honest with you. When I got the job on this big insurance, I just felt I had 2 offers, and I was thinking, you cannot do that. You have no idea about insurance. Where are you going? Why do you even consider that? And it was a great experience, and I learned a lot, and they learned a lot from me. But that was my motivation constantly on: have I worked with this data set? No. Do I want to work with it? Yeah. So let's get a job there so I can work with this data set.
I suppose it does help because the focus is really on data, right? It's not so much on the specific industry, but how do you integrate that specific business, which has its own uniqueness, versus this data? What do you think about when you bring those two things together? Because a lot of people would say, oh, I'm working in a different industry now. I don't know if I can cope with this. How do you transition that?
It's about coming to terms with ourselves that we don't know everything. Even if I work on the same industry for the last 30 years, although 21, coming back to that, I don't know everything because the technology is moving fast. Everything is moving fast, and you always have to learn. And if you stop learning, that's where you become irrelevant to the business, to everything we're doing. If you see, for example, the progress of data, AI, technology, if you have the same phone for the last 6 months, it's already dated. But our
Yeah,
knowledge is from when we finished the university. So if you don't get excited, if you don't get, I still get my favorite part of my job, especially now being on the consultancy side, is that every day I have to learn something new, and I have to learn quickly, and I have to process my head quickly, and I try to bring my insight on what I'm seeing. And it's not bad to say that you don't know, and it's not bad to say, sorry, I got it wrong, because
yeah.
you'll get it wrong, and it's better than actually pretending that you didn't. And
Mm.
then you're one of the big four consultants, which they always get it right, and you're just not clever enough to understand it. It's a bit of a challenge, but no, I found that. Don't get me wrong, some people cannot cope with that, and that's again okay. Not everyone's for everything, but moving industries is more about when I was working, let's say, and I still use, believe it or not, I still use examples from back of 2010 from my retail life of, and when I was insurance, it was the same, of how we can bring different data sets from something you've never seen before. So you didn't even know that existed there. It was for simple analysis, for example, you would never think that the black box vehicle data can help you improve, let's say, your road infrastructure, can help you predict a pothole, or can help you understand whether the driver is a safe driver or not, or even the car diagnose itself. On this example, we touched infrastructure, engineering, insurance, manufacturing. But if you don't know that this data exists, I'm
Yeah.
getting too excited about it now. I can speak about that for hours.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
So data, if you look at data, many businesses have really bad data. You've got shadowware, you've got technical debt, you've got all these different systems that businesses are using, you've got users entering incorrect data, there's outdated data, you name it, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you overcome that and bring in AI? Like, how do the two marry each other? What's the sweet point between that?
That's a very good question. And I'll tell you why it's a good question, because although we're talking about data, when we're speaking about AI, the biggest challenge that I have is we are starting with the tool or the solution, and we try to find the problem. And it works great if you're Microsoft and you want to launch your new tool that everyone wants to buy. But I use an example the other day that I was speaking with someone. I said, "Oh, Andreas, how many data analysts do we need?" And I'm like, "How many times do you wake up in the morning and you thought, I need an AI expert?" Never. And I'll see where I'm going with that, with the data, with the historic data. Um, and most of the times you wake up in the morning and you think about an occupation, it's not for any good reason. So it's either going to be a solicitor, a doctor, And if you wake up in the morning thinking about a doctor or a solicitor, you're not in a good period in your life. So I don't want to be on this category as a data analyst. And that's where the balance comes handy on what we said there about what you asked me there about the data. On some of your old data will be useful, and you need to find a way to interpret them to correspond to your new data set, to be able to work with a new data set, to be able to train your AI algorithm. But the problem on your data doesn't come from the existence of the data. You have to address the root cause of the issues. So if you do not want to have a future problem with your data, you need to have a proper data strategy to know why you're collecting what you're collecting and what you're trying to achieve as a person, as a business, as a corporation, etc. That's the first thing. The second thing, for the bad data that we discuss, you're never going to have an amazing data quality process if you don't fix where the problem is coming from. So if I constantly, for example, notice that someone inputs the wrong information, the wrong field, I can build thousands of algorithms that's going to cost me a lot of money to run every month to actually keep on fixing the same issue. Or you can get some change management, try to find how this person learns, understand why this person is doing it, and change the way that they're doing it. So eventually you start, for the business that you operate, a physical data set, you standardize it, you store them on the right format, you have your data engineering. And then for me to deploy an AI model on that or build your AI strategy, 10% effort. Your 90% is actually doing all the other rest.
Yeah. That brings me to a question, because I mentioned earlier, talk about business architecture, enterprise architecture, and things, concepts like conceptual modeling. So let's say conceptual modeling of capabilities and conceptual modeling of, let's say, your organizational structure and those kind of things. So it's not intended to be a physical data model in any way, but it's intended to frame the organization and give it context. And it's quite easy because it's a straw man view of your organization, and that at least allows you to understand overarching what you're wanting to achieve. So for a lot of us that look at architecture, enterprise or business architecture, we look at it and say, this is where AI could be really helpful in, let's say, giving us more insight into the straw man and really building it out even further. What is your thoughts around that kind of relationship between AI, conceptual modeling, data? How would you see it? Because you're saying it's about solving the problem first, which I agree with you, by the way.
Yes.
So how would you marry all of those together?
So come back to what you said on the architecture. Even if we go back to the data set, something that we always forget, before you do build any database, before you do anything, you need a logical model, which logical model is just agreeing the language they're going to use. And LLMs, large language models, because I want to be quite clear, when we use AI, for me, AI has a bit bigger variety rather than just the large language models, which is a trend that has been launched lately, and eventually it's going to flatten, something else will pick up. For me, all of these tools is a good starting point. Is a good point that, and I use it. I'm sure you use it. I'm sure everyone who's watching us in some part of their life, they're using it. It's a good starting point. My challenge is when this is becoming your only input.
Yeah.
When you want to build your straw man and you ask your large language model, which if it has been, let's assume that you're building a straw man for a retailer, okay, for business architecture for a retailer, and you have a model that has been trained on software development companies or any industry out there, your output will not be really useful.
Agree, because it's not contextually relevant. So you have to provide insight into the organization for the AI model. And what else? what other data do you need? Because I would 100% agree, if you're just using reference models, generic reference models, let's say, that's not going to give you anything worthwhile. But you can use that as a start with the context of the business with AI.
So for me, it's a two path there. If we're on the
Mhm.
starting point to solve the problem, because now we have established what the problem is, how do we move forward on actually building this architecture? You have
Yeah.
two roads to go down. The first one is you build your own bespoke. You train your don't build. You train your own bespoke LLM based on the data that you have, if you can find them available, and then you create a strawman which is going to be very close to what you need. But you also have the generic one. You can build the strawman, and the difference on the output may be a bit significant, but not too big. But the key point here is at the end of this output, you need to use your human to
Great.
to
Human
fix,
in the
yes,
absolutely.
to make sure that it gives the right answer. Then the next step, for example, is other data set that we said. If you are if you have information, let's say from HR, from finance, to see the scale of the business, what you're trying to achieve, competitor data, if you can find them available. So that's where you start. If I had the opportunity to do that, for example, for a customer, I would focus more on, let's use a generic model. Let's get someone who knows what they're talking about on the architecture side of things. And then I'll use my analyst to try, based on the strawman, find all the different data sets that they can bring, automate, and then you have that and you can keep on going. My key thing to that I found from my experience, rightly or wrongly, on this statement is what we have to get out of our head a bit is there's an end. There's no end. There's no end on the business change. There's no end of the business architecture. There's an end when the company goes bankrupt. Okay, don't get me wrong, or they decide to close it down. That's the end.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yes, but as a traveler, you have to enjoy the journey. There's no destination to go. It's just experiences that you gather on the way. I'm very philosophical for quite late in Europe now, but yes.
It makes sense. It makes sense because it's, especially with change in the organization, it's just so rapid. I'm sure you find with AI, it's been absolutely crazy. The change has happened. Even if you just look over the last year, from where they had the 3.5 models to what we have today with the announcement of the GPT-4, the Omni model, it's chalk and cheese really in terms of what they're offering. It's just crazy.
But we have to be a bit careful here, and we have to split a bit. What is change that will be make if we're talking for a business or if we're talking for a charity? The one is money, the other one is change people's life, and what is actually is a good way for some tech companies to upsell. So the change of the model is significant, I agree, but how much impact some of this will have on our, I feel like, and I see that with some of my clients, there's a constant panic because everything is changing, that we have to change everything. And I'm like, no, part of the business has to change. You have to keep your eyes on what's actually happening, but you need to have a strategy. You need to be focused on what you're doing.
I agree. I agree with you because you, without having some kind of vision for what you want to ultimately achieve, it's going to be so hard to really understand how all of this is going to come together because the change is too fast. And for normal people, it's just too fast. And if you're not a tech person, it's even worse because you're like, what's happening now? Why is this happening?
The change is fast for the last, let's say since the first iPhone came out, okay? You see the progress we have done,
Mm.
or the first Android, is significant. No one felt the stress about this change.
Yeah,
The reason that we feel the stress of the change is because we try to suddenly democratize AI. And for me, that's something else that I disagree with quite a few people is not everyone should be an AI expert. Not everyone should be able to use it. Not everyone should be able to code it. Not everyone's for everything. I want my doctor to use the AI without actually thinking of using the AI. I want him to get the advice and then do his own clinical
So
judgment.
just as a tool, really,
Yes.
not actually as a co-pilot, let's
Yeah.
call it that. Yeah, but rather as a tool. That makes
Yes.
sense. It
It's
does make sense.
and I saw a great example, to be honest, that I was seeing, and I will do no credit neither to the company nor to the team that built that solution, to be honest. But I was on a conference the other day on the European Eurocontrol, which is the European control agency. There was a presentation from Lufthansa, and with my limited brain capacity, and I will not try to replicate what they said. They have built a solution that was using quite a few large language models they have trained to help the pilot automate some of the reports that they have to do in case of some incident, which drop down the time from half an hour, 45 minutes to 3-4 minutes, or whatever the presentation is publicly available so people can see it. The pilot at that point didn't have to know anything about AI. What he had to do is follow the process, but the process
Mm,
was optimized to make his life easier.
mm.
So it's really depending how we do the change management there.
I would 100% agree with you there, because you almost want that digital twin. You want something that's going to be doing what is a natural process for you, but maybe is hard work, like things, documents, yeah, that's a real pain. So you want to minimize the amounts of documentation, but you want to make sure that the documentation is the right documentation that you need, for instance. If we're even going to have documentation in the future, who knows? But just as a simple example, that's one of the options.
And we have to be careful a bit with AI also, and also we may touch a bit further down that AI can introduce bias, and
Yeah.
AI can. I'm not talking about hallucinations of the LLM models, etc. But let's face it, your algorithm will serve you. Our aim with all of these algorithms is to create engagement. So if I want to create engagement, there are two feelings that I can make you addicted to my engagement: is either anger or agreement with what you're saying. And
It's
I mean,
interesting.
I have to
Mm-hmm.
in order to be stimulated and constantly stimulated, you need to have extreme feelings. And you start building polarization, because if I'm constantly stimulated with everything that agrees with me, because that's what the AI will give me, then we start building societies that they are playing on the extremes. So something for people to consider when what I want to say is that when you get a result and strongly agrees with you, I always challenge myself to say,
Yeah.
there's another opinion out there.
Mm. It's very interesting. I had many years ago, we were at this workshop and we were talking about customer journey maps and empathy and blah, blah, blah. And we had to put ourselves in the shoes of different personas, right? And I was working with an Irish lady. She's really hilarious. She's just funny normally. But by the time we got to the fourth or fifth persona that we were busy building out, and they said, what color would represent this person's emotions or whatever it might be? She said beige. Yeah, this kind of agreement
Yes.
thing, we often call it beige.
Yes.
So
And it's
it
good to
became
be based sometimes.
lots of beige out there.
Yes.
So let's just talk about the bias. Obviously, that comes from people repeating certain things, but surely we can choke it by the way that we do our prompting, by the way that we are setting up what AI can or cannot do, and putting in some checks and balances in that. What are your thoughts?
Uh, I want to say that further down during the session, but I'll say it now. I heard from someone, and I will not even try to get credit to that is too clever for me to have even thought to myself. It was, and I don't remember who said it, by the way, to give the credit. It was that we all agree that we should have boundaries and ethics on AI, and it's exactly the same as the world peace. We all
Yeah.
agree we should have one, but we have no idea what that looks like because we cannot agree on that. And what is ethical for me may not be ethical for you. What is biased for me may not be biased for you. And I was speaking with a government official of a country, I will not name a same, and said, "Oh, Andres, it's okay to have biases. Bias. We all have biases in our lives." I'm like, some of us are more proud than less proud than others on our biases, but I'm not very. I'm more concerned about. And I don't know whether you are aware of the computer says no attitude that I see that is happening a lot.
Mm.
Oh, the algorithm said that you cannot have X or you cannot have Y or your credit score is not good enough and the algorithm doesn't want to give you a loan. And I'm like, who is this algorithm? And how do you know that's trend right?
Yeah.
And most of the times it's not. And so I remember one time I was in Germany and I was using an e-bike, one of the big companies on e-bike. And while I'm driving, the bike logs and I'm being kicked out of my account because the algorithm has decided that there's a fraud happening in my account because that was a few years ago, because there's no way that people travel and use their bikes in different countries. I kid you not, 7 months down the line, my account was still logged because the agent was telling me the algorithm doesn't let me do it. And okay, it's an e-bike, but you don't want to train, for example, a doctor who said earlier to say, oh, I think it's a cancer, but the computer says it's not, so I will trust the computer or the
Yeah.
algorithm. And these are the kind of biases that kind of concerns me slightly more. And also, how do we impact, especially on the training, quite a lot of them coming from the medical side of things, the racial bias also, which is, let's not forget that most of our data that we're using are coming from specific demographics. And these demographics are generally white, male, Western. We know that our data are more. I'm trying to find the word, and as I said, it's quite late. They're more not biased. We have more data sets from specific category of people, yes.
Mm.
So we have to be very careful and be quite aware that when we say something that may impact someone's life, even the minor impact,
Mm.
if we trust the algorithm so much, yes, I feel uneasy
Yeah.
with that. And I feel that companies should be, that's controversial, should be liable. And I think what I found that the regulators do not do is that, yes, you can use new technology and I agree with you and go for it. And I use data, and my job is about data, but in order for me to do an analysis, I record what data I used, for what the purpose, what was my sample of my data, why I used it, what may be ignored, document it, have it somewhere. And when you have your customer or your patient or whatever it is, it just says, I disagree with that. Can we have a large language model to check whether at least the profile of this customer fits on the profile of the data that we used or not?
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine it's going to be challenging, but I think it's also pretty exciting. And I'm sure that's why you're in the industry, right?
And yes, it's great. It's great for me. I think that we'll have enough work to celebrate my more up and coming 21st birthdays that are coming.
There you go. Okay, so let's talk about the future.
Mhm.
What do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years? And specifically, are there any areas that will be mostly impacted?
I will say that they're not going to be in flying cars. Hopefully they will, but I don't think they will. Where the biggest impact will be, I don't even want to touch on the environment. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to say, no, I will. I will touch on the environment because since we're being quite honest, it's a quite interesting discussion we're having. I want to categorically say that I do not see how some of the claims that data will save the world will be true.
Mm. Mm.
And the reason that I say that is not because I don't think that the analysis will make the environment better. It's because we storage is not that big of an issue in a way compared to process. We process an enormous amount of data,
Yeah.
and we build more and more data warehouses, which consume more and more water, which consume more and more power. And I just want to put that there out there. Just if
Yeah.
and I will actually ask your audiences if any of the big tech companies ever say that. The first question to be, we consume more energy than aviation. Everyone's talking about aviation. No one's talking about the data processing.
Mm.
And you know what? You don't need this old email from about 20 years ago, so you can better delete it. So this is the first thing that I think that's going to becoming a bit more. People are going to become more aware of that. Change will be constant. The AI change, and I think the AI change will not be on the large language models. I think eventually it will plateau. It does what it does. It's a glorified chatbot, and that's eventually what it's going to be. I think businesses. Someone again said that the business will not going to be competing on the product that they're producing, but how quickly their algorithm can outperform another company's innovation. So eventually the innovation will be driven by quantum computing or an AI. And that's good news, to be honest. I do think that we should be working less.
Mm.
For what matters,
Yeah.
and we should
It
be
would
doing,
be good.
yes, and we should be doing less dangerous jobs. So I would be more keen to see some of the robotics and computers and AI to take over some of the jobs that humans should be doing. And I think that's going to be the great innovation, which probably most of the people never talk about because it doesn't give
Yeah.
money to big tech companies. So
I saw this woman on LinkedIn. It was just a post in one of the feeds, and she said, I don't want AI to write books for me or create pictures. I wanted to wash the dishes and make some dinner. And I thought, I totally get that.
yeah,
Obviously, I wanted to help me with writing books and making images, but if I really had to choose, it would be the boring stuff that you have to do every day, like
and it
washing dishes.
yes, and it's not this is not the fun stuff that people looking to automate. I just honestly find it fascinating how many hours have been spent and how much computing power that I could use to solve other problems. That's my own rant there. Has been sent to create a dinosaur in a space while a cat is watching them on. Life is too short for these kind of things. Yes, if your
Yeah, you make a
imagination,
good
yes,
point.
yes,
You definitely make a good point. I must say though, humans are actually really funny. When you end up doom scrolling, if you
yes,
stuck in some kind of doom scroll, especially if you're traveling, I suppose you go and you end up
just
looking at things. The connections humans put together for humor is unbelievable. If you watch some of the stuff and I get addicted to it. So I imagine, yes, but in terms of efficiency and is it climate appropriate? Probably not.
no.
It's probably not the best use of our resources, but it is certainly addictive.
But don't forget that again, probably most of the scrolling, the addiction comes from triggering big emotions
Yeah,
because it's
true.
most of the times the three key things that I heard through all my career, irrelevant of the industry that I work, was no, Andreas, you cannot predict what I'm doing or what is happening. No prediction doesn't happen. Like humans are not predictive, and I'm like, yes. If I check your day-to-day routine for the last 5 years, especially after a certain age, I can tell everything about you. Yes.
Yeah, it's
I'm still
predictive.
after 12 years, or I don't remember how many years I left my retail management experience, I can still, if you give me 3 receipts, I can quickly tell you more things about you that you can even dare to imagine that I know. That's the first one. The second one was, and that was from, I will not name the industry too much. Computers will not replace my job because my job is too important. And I'm like, if a robot can do surgery on a remote island from a doctor that uses the robot from miles away, I can reassure you your job is not that important. And if anything, I wish that the computer automates me. I can use my own avatar and I can enjoy a nice holiday. Humans are not predictable. Computer will not replace me. And what was the third one that I heard a lot? I have instinct, and my instinct is better than data. That's some parts of the world that are more worse than others. I'm like, and your instinct is wrong, and the data says it is. And if you don't listen, good luck to you. Life is too short. I don't have enough time for that.
Moving on.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, those are good 3 points there.
Yes.
That make a lot of sense.
I don't know how we went from the future to these 3 points, but I'm sure that yes.
It's been a great chat, and I think it's really good to just give people different perspectives as well. One of the key things I was explaining why we're doing blueprints at the moment was to bring in the human perspective. I felt it was quite important because we talk a lot about technology, but there's such a huge change happening in our environment right now. Let's talk about it and let's figure this out and figure out what is it important. So 2 more questions for you.
Yes.
I know it's late for you. Could you share some advice or lessons learned for professionals entering or growing their careers that might be interested in AI? Any advice for you, or data science, or any of those things?
I have one piece of advice that I found too late in my life, and it's not related to data and AI, and I'll come to the data and AI shortly. I was on a training, and that was about 2 years ago, or a year and a half. It's very recent. Towards at the end of my career, I sound like I'm going to retire tomorrow, hopefully, but not. I have more places on this planet to visit. But now, you give me just 1 second because I have to find the exact number. Rewards of work. So everyone is thinking, and especially our technical people and the data scientists and the data engineers and the people that get into this industry, if I do an amazing work, if my performance is 100%, that's going to be me recognized for my work. And someone just broke it down, and you know that I'm a numbers person. And what they said was that 10% is your performance, 30% is your image, and 60% is your exposure. And none,
Yeah.
it may sound obvious for most of the people. Never heard about that before. And she continued by saying, some people when they come to work, they want a pat on the back because they just woke up in the morning. So make sure that if you are of what you're doing, you're loud about it. Microsoft is loud about the large language model, and the first iteration were pretty. The latest Copilot is pretty not up there. I'll put that way, rather than saying something else. So make sure you're loud about your work, because most of our technical people, especially on this kind of work, they will not be. They're quite more of the introvert side. About data and AI and analytics is two quick things there is it's not a hobby. Not everyone can build data stories, and that as soon as you see a pie chart, you just immediately realize there was no analytical thinking there. You just try to make it look nice. When you see stack charts, it's exactly the same thing. There's no thinking, just to try to put a lot of colors to make it look nice, and it's not pastel. We're not kindergarten here. So that's the second thing on. I think that everyone can learn to do analytics, work with data, and you should be familiar of how to use data to inform your day-to-day job. Speak with people that they've done it and they're professionals about it, rather than just think you can just use an Excel spreadsheet. That's another thing that I blame Microsoft for, the Excel spreadsheet. Use an Excel spreadsheet to make it happen. And the last one is constantly try to learn. If you stop learning, And I know that the speed that the information is coming out, especially on the AI and on the data and analytics and the machine learning, is insane. And no human can keep up with that. So don't feel bad if you cannot keep up with the technology. Find your niche, find the area that you're interested, and nail it.
Yeah.
See what's happening, and also think, how can I use other things to improve what I'm doing there? Most of the people, till the time they're able to use something as simple as ChatGPT, they have a drop on their productivity, because you have to learn the keywords of how you're searching it. It's not that clever.
You have to know how to use it. Okay, last question. You could go back in time and give a young Andreas, give yourself a bit of advice. What would it be?
That's a very good question. Apart from start ballet earlier, okay, because I should have become a ballerina far younger. But now we have solved all my problems, I think, and it's a hard work. I don't try to bring the job down. And I say that because it is quite a nice way of keep your brain busy. And to be honest, the only advice I would say is enjoy every day. That's all. It's remember that always I was quite try to outperform myself. And probably that's why I am where I am, clearly. And I had my downs, which were more than my ups, looking back in time. And something that we have to acknowledge. No career is linear. No career is always going up, and no career is always happy, constantly happy. That's not true. We have our bad days, we have our good days. And
we change.
Yeah. And looking back in time, even if I was going back in time, the only thing that I will say is, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. Until now, on the ups and downs, the overall is okay. And probably give a bit more advice to celebrate and give the advice that I gave earlier, the 10, 30, 60. I would definitely needed that when I was starting my career, because I was very much of the mindset, give 100% of your performance to be amazing and the rest will come. But it's about your network. It's about how you build this network. And that's absolutely the only advice I would give back to myself, that don't try to do everything by yourself and try to change the world. You cannot change the world. That's the other thing. Just change small parts and enjoy life. It's not very data, this one. That's very much too much feelings there rather than too much data and analytics. But I think that, yes, just build your network and make sure that what you do, you enjoy doing it, because the days that you don't enjoy it, and I still have days, I was discussing with someone today, they said, oh, Andres, you seem a bit annoyed with some of your work that you're doing, which is normal. We're going to be annoyed. And I said, what I love about my job, and that made me realize that I always did through the years, was I love working with numbers. I love building these stories. I love finding this insight. I love communicating it also. Don't get me wrong. It's not just finding it, but focus on what brings you that pleasure. And if it doesn't bring you pleasure, either outsource it or drop it. Life is too short, as I said. Enjoy it. That's too
awesome.
motivational.
Oh, why not? Andreas, it's been amazing meeting with you. Unfortunately, other people didn't get to hear all of our stories before the session, but I think there's some really good nuggets in the session itself. It's been fantastic. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn or?
Usually it's LinkedIn. A quick tip for the LinkedIn. If you want to get in touch with me, add me on the LinkedIn. I'll accept all the invites. Usually have the follow on my first of my page. And the reason for that is salespeople or bots will always go for the follow, mostly the bots.
Yeah.
So that's why just click on the three dots and add me. And more than happy to discuss anything from advice on their career, or even if they want some support on their business, etc. But or if you just want someone to talk because you feel like no one goes through the same thing that you're going through on your data, I can reassure you we all go, and reach out. I'm more than happy to discuss and talk about it.
That's perfect. Thanks so much. I appreciate your time. It's been amazing. And I know it's late for you, so I really do appreciate you accommodating this session with us.
Thank you very much. And it was really nice. And it was the most enjoyable. We're almost 2 hours now. They will not see all of it, so it's okay. But it was really enjoyable. And yes, more fun than I was expecting, I'll be honest with you. So thank you very much for
Good.
that.
Me too. It was fun. Thanks so much.